This was a season that had so much promise, and it all fell apart.
Disaster.
Toxic. Tragedy.
Armageddon.
No regrets. It happens. People want to have some hope of what may happen in the future, but it's hard for me to say.
How do you know
Durant has had enough.
when it's time to go?
Requested a trade.
Run his course, you foul for the force, you hop in the Porsche and get on the road.
I can't worry about what people say. I just focus on me.
I'm built different, man, I feel different, even chill different when I whoop side. We laugh and I breeze past and I might blast on the future. When they find out that you lie, you're out of time.
We now welcome in senior NBA insider Adrian Wojnarowski. So, Woj, what stage are the Durant trade conversations in?
In my experience, Malika, there's two stages: the day a player requests a trade, and then the day he's traded. So sometimes it takes you looking back at the process to know how far into it you are. But certainly the Nets at this point, they're engaged on a number of fronts for Kevin Durant deals, and a deal of a player of this stature, typically they don't come together quickly. Now, if this trade request had been made prior to the draft and there was sort of the deadline of a draft and the ability to build a deal around picks in that window, it might have moved quicker. But now that we're in the offseason, training camp's still a couple months away, I think that buys the Nets certainly time to continue kind of canvassing the league. And, you start to get into negotiations with teams. They don't always move quickly. The goal of the Nets to get as much as possible. The goal, obviously, of teams who want to trade for Kevin Durant is to give up as little as possible. And certainly that can grind things, to where it's not necessarily a day-to-day back and forth among teams. I do think getting to Summer League, Sean Marks and, you go through the list of other executives who are going to be in Las Vegas, most of them starting Thursday, Friday. I think the face-to-face can be helpful, especially when you're trying to put together more complicated deals that might require 3-4 teams.
Absolutely. So how closely are the Nets and Kevin Durant working together right now, if at all?
Yeah, Sean Marks, the Nets GM's, he's in close contact, regular contact, I'm told, with Kevin Durant's manager, Rich Kleiman. And so they've got a good working relationship. I'm told they've continued to discuss different scenarios and discuss, how they can figure out moving forward here. So I do think that dialogue with the Nets and Kevin Durant's rep, that's been the case here in the days and time leading up to the trade request, and now since Kevin Durant asked out.
So what is the Nets' strategy here? When we're looking at the possible dominoes that can fall, right? One that continues to come to mind is Kyrie Irving. Is it possible that we could see Kyrie traded first?
It is possible, Malika, and obviously you don't have as wide of a swath of teams, as many conversations, not nearly as many going on for Kyrie Irving than you do Kevin Durant. And I think it's more isolated. The Nets have been engaged with the Lakers really here in the last week. And if they got to a place where there was a deal that made sense that the Lakers wanted to do, that Brooklyn wanted to do, then Brooklyn's got to measure the timing of it and how it would impact where they think they are with Kevin Durant. So the possibility that they could trade Kyrie Irving before Kevin Durant, it exists. There's also a possibility that they don't trade Kyrie Irving, and listen, that they don't find a deal as quickly as everyone might expect for Kevin Durant. Like, all of those things are still on the table, but I think certainly you've got to take them as two individual potential deals, and if you're going to trade them both, how do you get max value for both? The timing may land differently for either of them.
Hey there, welcome to NBA Today. I'm Malika Andrews, and I'm here with the best in the business. It's senior NBA insider Adrian Wojnarowski. And Woj, free agency, it really is in full swing. It's almost time for all of us to hop on a plane, head to Las Vegas for Summer League, but the basketball world is still on Kevin Durant watch. So where does his trade request stand as of right now, this moment today?
Hey, Malika, listen, Brooklyn continues to talk to teams around the league, and Try to see in a lot of scenarios, if there are multiple team deals they could put together to get back the assets that they would want for Kevin Durant, which are immense. You saw, I think, part of the baseline set with the Rudy Gobert trade and essentially 5 first-round picks, and that would only be, I think, part of the return Brooklyn would want. They want high-level players, perhaps an all-star, and then more players. They think this should look like one of the biggest trade returns in league history because there's never been quite a player like Kevin Durant on the market. And I think as executives get to Vegas this week, a lot are going to arrive in town Thursday, Friday, ahead of the weekend. And I think there's an expectation that GMs and team presidents getting in front of each other, Sean Marks being able to visit face-to-face with other GMs, I think that could be helpful in putting deals together.
Well, given that price tag, that asking request is going to be so high, that it is so immense, is there a path here, Woj, where we could see Kevin Durant return to Brooklyn?
Absolutely, especially, Malika, if this drags out and if there's not a deal found here in the next month and it goes into August and you get closer to training camp, Brooklyn, they don't have to take a deal that they don't want to do. They don't have to talk themselves into a deal. But then at the same time, I think Kevin Durant, as he looks at the situation, could he look at it differently over time? That's certainly a possibility. And I think as you look, if you're Kevin Durant and you start to look at the teams that you might land at, and then what those teams might look like after they have to unload so many assets, I think that's why there's no rush in this process. And I think perhaps there'll be a time where there's better communication going on between Brooklyn and Kevin Durant, and maybe that could impact the idea of him returning. But I don't think anybody's counting on it. And I think all sides are, proceeding as though, listen, that Kevin Durant will be traded at some point. But because of the years left on his contract, 4 years on his contract, and the fact that this is the off season, things can change, they can evolve, there's no question. Maybe at some point the Nets come to Kevin Durant with a trade and say, hey, here's something we're about to do. And he looks at it and says, maybe I'd rather stay here. Now, he doesn't have say. Brooklyn could go forward with it. I just think, Malika, there are a lot of scenarios where certainly Kevin Durant gets moved, but yes, where he could stay because people do change their minds. They change course. And the fact is, he's under contract, and they still have a very talented, pretty talented deep team in Brooklyn that when you look at it up against other teams in the league should be, with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving playing at a high level, should believe they can play with anybody.
With winning being his top priority, teams are going to have to give up so much to get him. When he looks at that roster that he's possibly going to, can I win with this roster, or do I have a better chance, like you said, at winning in Brooklyn? And we'll have to see.
Right. And I mean, I covered Kevin Durant in Brooklyn for 2 years. We have not spoken in this process. I wouldn't say we're especially close, but from being around him every day, that's sort of what I've noticed. It's about winning. And so what keeps making all of these trade scenarios that our insiders are coming up with and presenting to us that make sense maybe for one team don't necessarily make sense for Brooklyn or make sense for Kevin. And that's why this is such a difficult needle to thread here, with winning being the through line that they're trying to pull.
Well, the most important thing here is you're getting Kevin Durant for 4 years. Let's not just make it seem like, hey, we need to win today. It's like, no, we can say it's like, hey, this is our core. Absolutely. And over the next 1 year, 2 years, we can add these pieces, we can add these pieces, and maybe in the last 2 years of your deal is when our team is going to be fully loaded.
He has to buy into that.
Agreed.
Plan, right?
Agreed,
that's it. He has to be able to say, yes, cool, because you don't make a trade and mortgage all this stuff for Kevin Durant if you don't feel like Kevin Durant is going to come there, buy in, give you the time for the 4 years. And if he buys into that vision, and there are men, there are general managers who are so brilliant at doing that, someone like Masai Ujiri selling Kawhi Leonard on a vision for 1 year, that there are people who can do that, but it's not everybody that can do that.
Really quickly, remember, LeBron James won in his second year in LA. He won in his second year in Cleveland. He won in his second year in Miami. So it's not just about showing up and saying this. You remember what LeBron James showed up with in LA and what it turned into. So Kevin Durant and his team have to have the vision of like, hey, this might be what it is today, but this is what it can turn into.
As long as all those cards are on the table and they're all reading the tea leaves the same, that could be a beautiful thing, whether